Calling the Quabbin Regional School District School Committee to order. Thursday, March 13th, 6:03. 6:01 PM. First item of business is the statement regarding Zoom. Please.
Good evening. This meeting will be recorded and will be posted to YouTube and other social media platforms. By participating in this meeting, you understand that the recording could contain your video stream or your audio stream, including images of yourself or anyone in the room with you. If you choose to enable your video or audio device during the meeting, as well as anything or anyone else that may be in the background could be recorded. The recording could include any opinions you contribute and anything you say about yourself. On occasion, chat within the meeting could also be captured in the meeting recording. Therefore, anyone attending the recorded meeting may have aspects of their personal data recorded if they actively participate or not.
Thank you. Roll call for attendance.
Yep. Dr. Allen?
Here.
Mr. Marsh?
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps?
Yes.
Mr. Willanen?
Here.
Ms. Kelly? Ms. Garvey?
Here.
Ms. Cartier?
Here.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Here.
Ms. Muck?
Here.
Mr. Alfonso? Mr. Wiggler?
Here.
Mrs. Thompson?
Here.
Mr. Nutter?
Here.
Ms. LaRange?
Here.
Mr. Chairman?
Here.
Ms. Gatulis?
Here.
And Ms. Reeves?
Here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Again, good evening. First item is the public hearing presentation. We're going to go to that first. I'm going to turn it over to Mark Wiggler, and we'll go from there. Going forward.
Good evening. We've already had a couple budget meetings, and what's being presented tonight is a summary of our most recent budget meeting. And I would just read a brief paragraph that I prepared relative to how we got to this particular point in time. On Wednesday, March 6th, the Budget Subcommittee, after the superintendent's pertinent remarks relative to this year's challenges and a thorough presentation by Cheryl Duvall, approved a motion to forward the revised amount of $41,080,092 to the full school committee for its approval. This represents a reduction of $1,401,972 from the previous proposed budget, which we discussed at the end of January. And it's a 3.56% increase over last year's budget. The original proposal was a little over 7%, and it was moved down after some work with the administrators and superintendent and the fiscal people. It's down to 3.56%. I have a motion that in order to move this to the public hearing, it has to be approved by the full school committee. I move that the full school committee vote to approve the revised budget figure of $41,080,092, which represents an increase of 3.56% over last year.
Second.
Second, okay. Any further?
Any questions relative to this?
Seeing and hearing none? Roll
Dr.
call.
Dr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Marsh?
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps?
Yes.
Mr. Willanen?
Yes.
Ms. Garvey?
Yes.
Ms. Cartier?
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes.
Ms. Muck?
Yes.
Mr. Wiggler?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Ms. LaRange?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
You can now move to the hearing. A couple comments that I wanted to make before the hearing is we're going to be going through a number of slides. And if you have any questions, those folks on Zoom could really put the question in the chat as we go through the process. It's really better rather than wait to the end. We've done it both ways, and I think it works a little better for us when we actually address the question as we're going through the slides. I'm going to turn this over to the superintendent for a couple quick remarks relative to the process. And then we will move to Cheryl Duvall, our retired fiscal administrator, who's back to help us out through this process, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
So I just want to reiterate to everyone here that we are fully committed to working closely with our towns to provide the best education possible. You know, we face significant challenges given the governor's budget. We are expecting decreased revenue and we know there are increased costs. I've been thinking a lot and discussing with Cheryl and Stacy a lot about some of the decisions that we've had to make to fund our operating budget and how we need to really think about how we're going to make it sustainable for our district over time. So in this presentation, you will see that each year we're using more and more money to offset our budget. You're going to see the use of E&D. You're going to see the use of rural school aid. And for the first time ever, you're going to see that we're using investment income as a revenue source. We've never done that before. And our fear is that if we do not get changes to our formula and we do not see things change, we are going to be each year in a more and more challenging position. This year, as you're probably aware, there are executive orders that have already impacted our budget, our schools, and our students. So one of those orders was through the USDA, where they abolished a food and nutrition program that allows us to buy food from local farms. So that has impacted our food and nutrition department and ultimately our students. Also, each year we receive reimbursement from, I'll assume it's the Navy, Cheryl, for our ROTC uniforms. That was cut within a matter of hours. Stacy went in and the money was gone. So we have a lot of instability. Given that, I want you to know that the budget that we're going to present to you tonight is really made up of a lot of hard decisions. And some of those include reduction in force. So we'll talk about that. If I can say there's one element of hope, it is that we believe that we will be able to lobby our legislators and make a difference. So during our regular school committee meeting, I will share with you those opportunities, but both Senator Durant and Representative Berthium have agreed to come here on Friday, the 21st to the PDC at 11 o'clock to hear a little bit about the Quabbin challenges. And then you are all invited, you're all invited to that, and I hope you come. And you're all invited to attend UMass Amherst on the 24th when they have the Ways and Means hearing. So, you know, as Mr. Wigler said, I encourage you to ask questions. I would bet some money that this is probably not the final budget that you're going to see. But I'm also asking you to maintain hope with me and, you know, really advocate so that we can hopefully make changes that help us in the long term and not just for this year. And I'll turn it over to Cheryl.
Few comments before we begin. The members of the Budget Subcommittee have seen and heard most of the data that is included in this presentation over their last two meetings. There are some slides in here that I won't specifically speak to. It has a lot of information on it, but I've highlighted what I want to point out to the committee, and it's there for members of the committee or the public to go back and read at their convenience. Usually in this presentation, I include some comparative budget data of our district to other districts in the state. However, a member of the DESE School Finance Office told me that data is not available till the end of the month, so that's not included in here this time.
So I seem to be having difficulty, but give me a second. Okay.
Also, the first few sets of slides in here, you've all seen many, many, many times, but it's really there for the public. This is the public hearing, and there may be some people who don't know who Quabbin is and what we do. So those slides have kind of been consistent in my public hearing presentation over the years. I'm going to go rather quickly.
Okay.
Okay. So what is Quabbin Regional School District? It is 5 communities and 170 square miles. It's 7 school buildings and 1 administrative building. This year we have 2,138 students from 29 communities. We have 395.65 FTE employees as of 2 days ago. We have over 500,000 square feet of building space to maintain and over 26 acres of athletic fields at the middle high school. We are utilizing 23 buses and 23 vans to get our students where they need to be. As you know, you are governed by a 15-member school committee. We are a $50 million plus organization. On this slide is also the vision of the graduate, which was worked on over the last few years by the administrators, just there for your information, if you'd like to go back to it. The principles that guide the development of not only FY26, but all of our budgets. We tried to develop a budget which reflects the priorities of the school committee, that aligns with the district's mission, vision, core values. It aligns with the district's strategic plan as well as the district's and individual school improvement plans. We are trying to look towards the sustainability, but that is very difficult in these years. We take into consideration our declining enrollment as well as our declining revenue sources. We try to be proactive rather than reactive, and we hope that it is clearly communicated to all stakeholders. Our strategic plan was developed by input of school committee members, administrators, teachers, staff, and community members. I believe it was over about a 6-month term in FY23. The strategic objectives come out of that strategic plan, which includes strategic initiatives, the superintendent's goals, and administrator goals, which also include quantitative outcomes. And the budget is the fiscal spending plan by which to advance or attain the completion of those strategic goals within the years that the strategic plan is for. The active strategic plan moves us through next school year. So I have for you the vision and mission of the district, as well as the theory of action, the core values, core values and strategic objectives. I think you've all seen that before. The objective of a budget is to make the best use of all the resources you have in order to achieve the district's mission, vision, goals, and strategic objectives. That is people, time, space, and money. Some of the critical factors that you need to have to be successful in implementing strategic plans is that the budget incorporates on a strategic level, not only on an operational level. So we're not looking how we're going to get to the end of the week, the month, the year. We're looking how we're going to get through the next 3 years in the strategic plan. Our strategic goals are supported by the budget and the budgeting process. We do the best we can, even though we cut along the way. And we try to make sure we have sufficient resources and that funding is allocated. The superintendent helped me with some of our significant challenges for the coming year. Again, it's loss of student enrollment, resident enrollment. We're getting only minimum aid of $75 in Chapter 70. So our district is deeper and holds harmless debt, which I'll go through later on in the presentation and describe in more detail. We continue to have hiring issues. We have been unable to fill positions in a timely manner, which leads to increased cost of substitutes. And in the area of special education, it's very hard to find staff to help in those positions. Our technology refresh cycle, if you remember back in March of 2020, when we had to close the doors immediately, and we had to get the students online. The government helped us with that by giving us money, specifically ESSER grants, 1, 2, and 3. But now those grants are gone and we have refresh cycles to maintain that hardware. We have social, emotional, mental health, and physical needs across our district, which has increased clinical needs and therefore no people to fill those clinical positions. We have curriculum adoption that's happening. We have to get high quality instructional materials. Once I think the pilot programs for funding with grants, now we're moving to use the product and we need to include those costs in our budget. We have some key district priorities. We are keeping focus on our district's mission and we are committed to prioritizing the following next year. Academic support, providing increased supports to students and focusing on inclusion and effective models, especially in special education. And one of our key district priorities is diverse learning needs and making sure that we are building in-district programming for specialized needs, hoping to keep students from going out and maybe even bring a few students back from out-of-district placements. Looking at school year enrollment, because that's ultimately who we are building a budget for. Our district uses 3 distinct enrollment numbers. And we talk about these numbers as of October 1. Those are the official enrollment numbers of the state at this time. Resident enrollment is 1865. You saw that on a previous screen. students enrolled in the district who live in our 5-member communities. And it also includes any of our former residents that are temporarily living outside the district, for example, foster placements or homeless students. Our school enrollment are students that are enrolled in our district schools. So they're actually in Quabbin buildings. Those are our resident students, school choice students, and if we were to have any tuition in students. And district enrollment are all students served by the district. So resident students, school choice students, are students that are placed in out of district placements, as well as students that are receiving services only, or if we have students that moved into another district that we are financially responsible for. The resident enrollment comparison over the last 3 years is available for you. We lost 44 students in resident enrollment. This is a critical variable in the regional school calculation of assessments. So I want you to notice that every member community went down in resident enrollment other than New Braintree, which saw an increase of 3 students. I provide for you a graph that shows the trend. This provides the data from 2003, 2004 school year, and other than in school year 2017-18, we have seen a steady decline in resident enrollment. We all know that. Since our highest year of 2004, 2005. This graph shows the actual resident enrollment from 2002, 2003 through the current school year in blue, and then projected enrollments through the next several years. These enrollments were provided by NESDEC, New England School Development Council, who did a demographic study for the school committee. On the next few slides, I actually have graphs that came out of that demographic study. This shows predictions of enrollment in our communities for residents that will be coming to school in grades pre-K to 5. You can see that most of our communities are expected to have a stable, relatively stable enrollment over the next 9 years. But you do see that in green, that's Hubbardston, is already seeing a slight increase and continue to have an increase through the next few years. At the secondary level, you can see that Ocam appears to slightly gain students. Hardwick appears to gain at a higher and faster rate, but look at Hubbardston again in the green, which is going to surpass the number of Barry residents in the secondary level. The next graph actually puts the data together for pre-K to grade 12. Again, relatively stable for everyone. It's interesting to see that Barry's actually going down slightly, but Hubbardston's taking over, and it actually looks like we'll have more Hubbardston residents than Barry residents in the next 9 years. Our residents that are attending school out of the district as school choice somewhere else or in charter schools. Our school choice sending history is in this line graph. You can see that it steadily increased, but there was a severe decline during what I'm calling the COVID-19 years. And then it started to go up again in school choice out. On the charter side, however, it's kind of going down steadily since the year 2020.
Does that mean our kids leaving us and going to charter schools?
These are our students leaving us to attend charter schools. The graph before was they're attending other districts through school choice. This is our school enrollment comparison. Those are kids sitting in our schools. We lost 57 students district-wide over the last year. Over the last 3 years, 61. But over the last 22 years, we lost 1,100 students. Crazy, I think, that on that far. This graph will show you that only Ruggles Lane had an increase in students this school year. Everyone else saw a decrease. I provide for you school enrollment by grade level. Stacy and I were looking at these numbers yesterday, and we saw that it was crazy that first at the middle school has only 45 less students in 3 grades than the high school has in 4 grades. But even more so, back in 2004, 2005, when we had our highest enrollment, at least since I've been in the district, the middle school had 568 students in 2 grades. Wow. And the high school had 1,048 students. Currently, there's 1,046 in all the elementary schools, pre-K to 5. We've lost a lot of students over the last 10 years. This is the actual enrollment of school choice enrollment for the last several years. Although the number of students attending Quabbin through school choice has decreased over time, you'll see later on that it's really not as a percentage of the total number of students in our district, it's staying relatively stable. I said earlier that we have 24 sending towns this year, so 29 different towns come to our school. I have listed for you where they're coming from. 3 of these students are school choice in and then out of district placement. So sometimes you'll see the school choice number be 273 because they're counted. Other times you'll see it only as 270 because they're not in our school buildings. So this is the chart I was referring to for the last several years. School choice enrollment as a percentage of total enrollment in our schools has been between 11.9% and just slightly over 14. So not really a big difference as compared to the graph of the number of school choice students that have been here. We used some methods and assumptions when we developed our salary budget. As you all know, the salary budget is the largest portion of our budget. So when we were budgeting for salaries, positions that are covered under collective bargaining agreement, we have a few agreements that are current and a few that are being negotiated for next year. So the contracts that are current, the increased step and negotiated COLA has been applied in those accounts. For collective bargaining groups that are in negotiations, funds for negotiations have been budgeted in the contingency account line. That's where we budgeted them in the past, so nobody can figure out how much money we got to use. If we have positions that are open or they're being requested as new positions for next year, if it's a K-8 teaching position, it's budgeted $70,600. If it's a 9 through 12 teaching position, $76,740. We found that we really can't hire at the high school, middle high school level at the same cost as an elementary teacher. Positions that are covered by individual contracts or at-will positions have been budgeted at the same COLA as the current collective bargaining agreements. But again, they're just budgeted, not actually real at this time. And other open positions are budgeted at a lower amount than the existing employee. This is a chart that I know it's very small, but you can see it online a lot better. This chart shows the positions that were initially budgeted due to being unfilled, because we do have, I think, 2 positions that are 2 or 3 unfilled positions this year, as of right now. Or they are open due to retirement during this year, or at the end of this year, or they're being requested as new positions for next year. So the total is $1.2 million. And I kind of outlined for you where those positions are and what they're for. As Mr. Wigler alluded to, we came to the budget subcommittee with a budget of 42.5 million, and budget proposal 2, we're at 41.0. I'd like to take a moment to have you understand how to use the budgeting documents and how to best read them. I've asked the budget subcommittee, I still haven't received an answer, if we could use the computer generated budget document as the line item budget rather than keying this all into an Excel sheet that then flows in the next one. But this document is 47 pages long, subtotals each category by function code. The function code is the 4-digit code in the account number, and that's a DESE code that we use. Those function codes that are subtotaled then come over to this report and are in the black, which are then further subtotaled, and you can find them on the appropriation control report, which is the format by which the school committee has adopted to approve a budget or budget transfers between and among. So the least detail, intermediate detail, and the most detail of our budget. Our total budget, I think, is 280 something pages long with the detail. So just would take a moment so people know how to look at the budget. So changes that we made from the preliminary budget, which is at the top, $42,482,064. We had some increases we need to make because at the end of January, you don't have all of your expenses known. We needed to increase the budget for retired teachers' health insurance by $34,000. Our business and school committee business policies, insurance policies came in for this March 1st. So we have those now. Now we can predict better what FY '26 will be. So we needed to increase that a bit. And one of the softwares that I talked about earlier, we piloted a program and we're going to go full board with that program. We made the change between the software that we're getting rid of and the software coming in, needed to make a slight change there. We also had some areas where we decreased the budget in instructional supplies, materials, and activities throughout all of the cost centers. The retirement benefits, there's one teacher that said, yeah, I think I'm going to retire in '26, and then said, nope, not really '26. We backed that money out. We have removed almost all, except for one, of the building improvement projects that we had brought to the first meeting. That was $155,000. We are keeping one that I'll point out later. There were some buildings and ground expenses and contract services that we were able to reduce. Majority of that $88,000 is the oil costs went down by 42 plus cents. So we were able to reduce the oil budget by $83,000. Therefore, we will not be topping off the tanks in the end of May and June. In athletic equipment, 2 pieces of equipment were removed from this version of the budget. Health services, supplies and equipment, that's going to actually be charged to a grant. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was something that we could get rid of the transfers down below. Guidance supplies and contract services, a slight decrease there. In positions, there were some changes. Some people have decided to resign at this time. So again, I make a reduction in that account number. Somebody that was making $60,000 is leaving that. Now the new person coming in 55. So I've made those changes along the way. Superintendent talked about a reduction in force and position cuts. We are also transferring some expenses to other funding sources. I made mention earlier that I made the mistake. There's some items in a health classroom that is going to be moved over to a comprehensive school health grant, only $1,000. The one building improvement project that I alluded to is replacing the cafeterias at Ruggles Lane School, the cafeteria tables. They're really at a point of disrepair in such that the edges are broken. It's made out of particle board, and kids are getting their hands pinched in there, their clothing ripped. So those have got to be replaced. We're going to charge that to the rural school aid grant. And also we're taking a portion of the retired teachers' health insurance and going to pay for it with rural school aid. We've done this in the last 2 years, but at a much lower amount. One of the reasons why, instead of being at $360,000, it's going to $900,000. I'll talk about more later, but we're going to reduce the amount of E&D that is used to support this budget. And we're doing that by increasing the use of rural school aid in this one line item. When we decided to do this and take an operating cost to post it to rural school aid, we decided we we're going to use one account. It's very easily identifiable. It's transparent. And if we don't get that amount of rural school aid, it's one transfer back. Rather than we talked about taking the new programs that we want to put all those people and supplies in that grant, and then you don't get it and you got to move it all back. It's very transparent, one line item going over. So again, the preliminary budget minus the changes of 1.4 million, this budget proposal is at 41,008,0092. And it's a 3.56% increase over the current year. This is the appropriation control report. I know this is very small to see as well, but there's one in your packet and online. As I described, the appropriation control report is a document by which the school committee has approved a budget. As we go through the budget process, you will see each version of the budget on this document. Now I'll quickly go through each of the appropriation categories and identify the major reasons why there's an influx of change in that line item. If you want to have any questions, please stop me. In district administration, it's actually a small decrease. Someone decided to retire and someone came in at a lower salary. Also, there was an increase in the school committee insurance policies. Even though we haven't had any type of claim, the insurance policies went up. And also the estimated COLA has been applied to staff that are in that category. In administrative technology and support, a slight increase, 7%. Mostly there is a reduction here due to a district-wide software for wireless and firewall licensing that's actually a 3-year contract and it was paid this year. But Here's the addition of the refresh cycle that I talked about earlier. So we have building level administration and support hardware, which is in little language, is the principal and secretary or office managers, laptops or computers need to be refreshed. In the instructional support category, which really is every expense that happens in the classroom, we have contracted salary increases and lane changes that have been approved are in the budget. Lower salary amounts have been budgeted for open positions. There's been a reduction to substitute accounts. We have a reduction in force and a reallocation across categories. At this point, the administration is not ready to identify specific staff reductions in force or reassignments, as the staff have not been notified yet. So now we're not going to put their position up there and everybody's going to go run crazy tomorrow morning.
Cheryl, I'm just going to actually pause you there. So since we met the last time, I have notified, I feel comfortable sharing what the positions are without sort of stating person or school location. And I think you probably want to know that. So I'm just going to go through. It includes 6 positions. One is a CNA. Another is a permanent substitute, an elementary clinician, an elementary special education teacher, an elementary teacher, and a team chairperson. Of those 6 people, 2 of them will be used to fill open positions. 1 of them will fill a retirement. Our goal is to always retain our people. So I will, as we make further reductions, sometimes opportunities come up or, throughout the year. So I'll keep you informed of that. But there are 6 positions that are being reduced in this budget.
And the transfer of supplies to the health grant, keeping that in mind. In transportation services, this is the big yellow buses. We have had to increase auxiliary transportation for homeless and foster student transportation. For the current year, we looked at FY24 and we said we can make a reduction. We didn't use a lot of that money, so we made a reduction and all of a sudden we saw a lot. You can never predict how many students you'll need to transport that are either in foster placements or are homeless and living outside of the district. This year, we're actually in a negative in those accounts, so we bumped that up a bit. But also our contract has a 4.9% increase.
I have a question. What's homeless? We have homeless children?
Yes, we do. So when students go into foster care, they may be considered homeless. And we do have students in our district that are homeless.
Foster care, I can see. What sounds like somebody with a newspaper over him under a bridge.
Sometimes we do have families that may be living at a campground or out of, the best situation that they can find possible. And they are included in that as well.
I can add to that. Also, families who might be doubling up with another family member. So if they've lost housing and they're temporarily living with another family member, but don't have it's not permanent, that can be considered homeless as well.
In school nutrition, there has been we're just level funding that at $500. The governor's budget includes 3 meals for all students. I'll have a commentary for that later. So we have level funded this for bad debts because if students do have money on their account that they don't pay for, district's budget has to pay for them at the end of the year. In athletics, there are contracted salary increases for our staff members as well as our athletic coaches. There is a statewide 6% increase in official fees going into place for next year. There's increasing costs of supplies across the board, no matter what kind of supplies there are. We need to do a football helmet replacement. There's a certain number of years. They get reviewed almost every year, but then they have to be replaced. So we have a replacement in here. And replacement uniforms, that's mostly for damaged uniforms. We're not replacing a whole team. And there's an increased cost of MIAA registration and association fees in athletics.
How much do officials get?
I can't tell you.
I think it's different for different sports.
We don't set those fees, Dr. Allen,
Well, I
MIAA.
understand that, but we pay them though, don't we?
We pay the officials, yes.
I was just, I go to the games and I see these guys running around, sometimes doing a good job, sometimes not. At the time they threw me out. No, I didn't think so. But I just wonder how much they get for that.
I can actually look that up tomorrow. It's not a payroll thing, Dr. Allen, it goes through accounts payable, so I can get that information to you and let you know.
No, you don't need to do that. It's just-
I can do it the next meeting then. That'll be my report. In student activities, there is a 10.64% increase in there. There are contracted stipend increases for the advisors. And we have added the IP DECA advisors that were grant funded this school year. But I know the superintendent has met with someone about these accounts, and then we do have some reductions we'll be making the next time around. Can't bring you a reduction today. In school security, there's a slight increase there. We had a school security person, and we had a lunch monitor at the middle high school level, and one person has now taken that job. So there's a slight decrease there, and COLA increases for those positions as well. In the area of buildings and grounds, there are contracted salary increases for that collective bargaining unit. There's an increase in general custodial buildings and grounds and maintenance supply costs, about 10%. Our reduction in heating oil helped us there, 42.92 cents or $83,000. And we are transferring that one building improvement project at Ruggles Lane to rural school A. All the other projects have been cut in this round. In technology and infrastructure, that's actually where our technicians' pay is. So we have an estimated COLA there. There's a reduction in an estimated salary for an open position. Somebody resigned as of today, I guess was his last day. We do have, however, the replacement of wireless access points at Ruggles Lane. In the area of benefits, the Worcester Regional Retirement Assessment came in. It is 7.8% increase. We had estimated retirement benefits for 10 retiring employees in there. We have an estimated increase in health insurance for 7%, but it's only over 6 months, so it's not that bad of a deal. That is what our broker, I wasn't part of the decision for what happened to our health plan this year. And actually, it's very hard for me to wrap my head around what is involved. But he said, since we don't know the amount of claims that will come in, whatever, he said, use 7% for moving forward. And although retired teachers' health insurance went up by 22%, we're making a reduction of $900,000 of that and posting that to rural school aid. In fixed charges, this is really the business insurances that went through the roof. I believe I was at that first budget meeting where we thought we had the quotes, and then the next couple of days I found out that was the renewal rates that were coming in. And I tried to beat up our agent, but I didn't get anywhere. One of the increases in our insurance coverage, however, we made the decision to increase our coverage for cybersecurity, infiltration, and data compromise from a $100,000 coverage to $250,000. Director Walsh made that proposal early on in the budgeting process, but also our insurance agent, when I was talking to him, says most schools are moving to that because some schools have been hit with cyber attacks. So we'll be covered to get some of that, have to get their data back. But-
Or what does that mean, the 100K and the 250? Is that covered? Like an instance of one instance or any number of situations that it can occur and where,
Well, that's the limit that we would get reimbursed would be the 250,000.
but is it per incident?
No, I don't think it's per incident. I think it's one incident.
Okay.
Yes. I have the policy later if you'd like to look at it with me.
Sure.
The tuition in this line item is for school choice school choice sending. So students that are going out through school choice or to charter schools. This is based on the cherry sheet of the governor's budget. However, even though the enrollments were known at the time, I'm a feeling these are going to change as we move through the budget process. So we'll see what happens with that. In the area of special education, legal services have been level funded. Administrative technology and support has a large increase, but that's really based on the number of licenses that we are using in the special ed area. It's a large percentage, $1,600. Instructional support, again, the largest part of our budget in special ed, contracted salary increases and lane changes, an increase in membership dues to our collaboratives, an iPad refresh cycle, includes salary for a position that's been open most of this year. It includes the request for 2 salaries previously funded through grants because we suspect those grants will be lowered. And we can't do without the students, the paraprofessionals in those programs, a reduction in force and reassignment of staff. And it also includes the requested positions that we brought forward from the beginning. We have a need for a new para for a student that we are expecting to come back from an out-of-district placement. You'll see a reduce it in tuition, but we'll need a para. And the 3 positions that we need to create a new program. If you want more about the program, I asked Ms. Langlois to talk about that. But a therapeutic classroom teacher, an alternative classroom teacher, and a clinician. The superintendent spoke of a clinician that was being cut at the elementary level, but moving into this program. You have any questions for Ms. Langlois about that program? No?
I just have a quick question. I mean, the number of students involved in special ed is increasing on a regular basis. Is that correct? I mean, are we talking in the 20s?
Jill, what's our percentage right now?
About 24.
24%.
The last time I read the number was about 24%.
Okay, but that's been increasing significantly over time. Partly due in fact to, fallout from the pandemic and probably a lot of other.
Yes.
Special ed transportation service is actually being reduced, although our contracted increase is 7.4%. When we build the budget for next year, we look at where the students are actually going this year. What happens is at the end of last year is when the IEP meetings happen. Some students may have come back, some students may have moved. So we base it on the current routes, and that might need to change as we move through our budgeting process. The tuition here is special ed tuition for out-of-district placements based on current placements and with the possible return of the 1 student we just spoke about. In debt, we have a declining debt schedule for both the middle high school green repair project and the killer project that 3 of our towns are paying for. So that's a small reduction there. Any questions on any of the expenses? I know that was very quick. Looking on the revenue side, the following 3 screens have information that I took from Mass Budget and Policy Center, their website. And although there's a lot here, I have bolded what I really want to talk about, and then you can go back and I have a link to where I got this information from. But notes on the governor's budget for FY26, $170 million has been budgeted for the universal free school meals. I couldn't find anything about whether or not that was enough coverage, but what I did read was it has been level funded from this school year, which they talked about last year at this time, saying that was not enough to cover universal free school meals. So we'll see where that shakes out in the end. And also that this is the 5th year of the implementation of the Student Opportunity Act. The administration included $420 million in new Chapter 70 aid. It's not coming here though, guys. You can read the rest there. And also the governor's budget proposal and accompanying FY25 supplemental budget includes more money to come for specific K-12 grants. Also an increase of $150 million in special education circuit breaker, which will definitely help us in FY26, and an increase of $50 million to school transportation reimbursements. If we get that reimbursement this year, there's a way to use that money for FY26. We're hoping that this supplemental budget will help us move forward if it gets through the rest of the budget cycle. These are my commentaries on the governor's budget. The 5th year of the Student Opportunity Act, $420 million. That's a 6.1% increase. 10 districts are receiving 58% of that new money. And there they are. Springfield, $40 million in new money. Worcester, Lawrence, Lynn, Fall River, the same ones that have been getting it for the last 3 years. I've been asking and no one will show me the return on investment. Because we're getting nothing, but they are getting double-digit $1 million increases for the 4th year. Where's the return on investment? This is Cheryl DeVal's commentary. 20 districts are receiving 73% of that new money. So 232 districts out of the 319 operating districts are only receiving minimum aid $75 per FTE. That's where we are. There's different numbers here because there's different ways of counting districts. An operating district is Quabbin Regional School District. I pointed out in the last meeting, New Braintree has a student attending Smith Voc this year. They are considered this year, right? Not next year. This year.
Last year.
He graduated. Oh, last year? Okay. Really?
Mhm.
Oh, yes, last year.
Yeah.
They would be considered a non-operating district because they're a member of a region. They're not an operating district. So the next line says there's 267 out of 374 districts because those are including non-operating districts are now in hold harmless debt. Quabbin fell further in hold harmless debt by $621,000. With that decline of 44 resident students, we lost $621,000. We have now the 38th largest hold harmless debt at $2.8 million. Boston has the highest amount at $27 million. I prepared a list of the history of hold harmless debt in Climate for the last 7 years. We had $5.3 million in 2020. We ranked 13th out of 279 districts that were in hold harmless and 368 total districts. We then dropped a little bit to 5.27. We dropped to 5.1. And then the implementation of the Student Opportunity Act hit, which gave more money in certain areas of the budget, like special education and benefits, but also gave more money for students who are English learners in three different levels and low-income students across 12 different levels. So when you added that money at those levels, that's what lowered our debt. But we haven't seen any new money from the Student Opportunity Act yet. For you, those of you that have been on the committee for a while, back when we saw that reduction, Dr. Muir and I said, oh my God, we'll be out of hold harmless debt in 5 years. We're going to be there. And look what happened. We went down the second year from 2.8 million to 2.1, and we lost more kids in 25. Fiscal year 25, and for fiscal year 26, we're even losing more kids. So our numbers are even going up higher. So I don't think we'll ever be out of hold harmless debt, to tell you the truth. Until Hubbardston starts seeing all those increases and the green line going up. So it's too bad because I really thought we would get out of there by now. This next screen is kind of a commentary as well. The foundation budget is the minimum amount of spending a school district needs to provide for an adequate education to its students. $75 per kid. And Fall River's getting $2,171 per kid. Adequate education?
How much is our per student?
Oh, I'm getting there.
You know?
I'm getting there, Dr. Allen.
Oh, thank you.
The next slide is extremely small, I know, but I think there's a copy in your packet, and this particular screen will be online as well. The foundation budget, for those of you that don't understand it, is developed by DESE by applying a certain rate of money to a grade level or other classification of student in the different areas of cost. So these are the rates for FY26, and I realize it's very hard to see. But you'll notice that there are 12 levels of low income rates here. But you don't get money, they don't look at every one of our students, see where they are on the low income scale, and you get that amount of money for that student. Collectively, we get assigned a group number. So Quabbin's low income percentage for this school year is almost 39%. 39% of our students are in the low income category. So we've been assigned to group number 7. And so our pupil foundation budget, Dr. Allen, is $14,788 as compared to the state average of $16,720. This chart, however, you'll see this is a DESE chart. If you couldn't slide, if you couldn't see, I made sure that I put DESE down there, and this is their background, not Quabbin. This chart does not include vocational or agricultural districts, because their funding is a whole lot different in academic regions.
This is all our kids, not just low income.
This is just the slide talking about low income students and what percentage we are. and what group we are in to get what rate. So the next screen will employ those rates that I showed on the screen before. Jess, if you can go back, I know it's very hard to see. But low income group number 7 would get, I have to put this larger so that I can see. Low income group number 7, which Quabbin is, would get $83.32 for its foundation budget for every student for administrative costs. If you were in a low income group of 12, which I'm thinking maybe Springfield may be, they get $128 as compared to our $83 in that category. So that's how foundation budget is built. They get more money per student in their foundation budget for that cost. When we put it all together, this is Quabbin's foundation budget. If you go two more screens, Jess. Back. Nope, forward. One more forward. One more forward. There. That's a foundation budget for Quabbin. It's built on $14,788 per student. So those rates are applied to each one of the foundation enrollment on the top, because there's our enrollment in each one of those categories in the base foundation components. So you see the note I put down the bottom. Every student is counted in categories 1 through 7. And then if they are special ed in special education programs, if they're an English language learner or they're a low income, we get additional money for each one of those students. And you total it all up, and that's what they say we can provide education for, $14,000 per student. I think Colleen and I would disagree. Looking at the revenue side, the cherry sheet, the target share and regional allocation of required local contribution. This is a cherry sheet based on the governor's budget. This is put out by the Department of Revenue, and each way they go through the budget cycle, each house, they'll update this sheet. I then take this sheet and throw it into a spreadsheet for you to see of what our difference is from the current year. So our Chapter 70 increase is 0.82%, $141,000. We're going to read in Chapter 70. There's a decrease in charter tuition reimbursement because you look below, we have a decrease in charter sending tuition. So you only get reimbursed for what you send, so therefore. We expect a decrease in school choice receiving tuition. I know we'll work hard to get new students into our district next year, but it's not looking very good on the revenue side for us.
How much do we get for those school fees?
We get $5,000 per student. And if they are a special education student, we get additional money for them. And that comes directly from the town that they reside in. So when my students came here from Petersham, my kids were not in special education, but $5,000 came for Jared and $5,000 came from Dalton. If Dalton was in an out-of-district placement with specialized services, say he had a one-on-one there, or he had a PT and OT, a speech therapist, and an out-of-district service, we pay nothing. It all came from Petersham.
That 5,000, that's the same as it was 25 years ago.
It's the exact amount when the law was written, yes.
Yep.
The rationale given by DESE personnel was you're taking money away from the home district. And poor Senator Gobi when she was senator, because I would attack her whenever I see her. That's not really true. For example, my 2 kids should have gone to Mahar. If they went to Mahar, they get the Chapter 70 amount of money for their student. But they came here and we got $5,000. Mahar never saw my kids. That was a totally different school district for them to go to. They were in Petersham Center School, an independent district. They never stepped foot in Mahar. They wouldn't be losing anything because they never were there and they were coming here. But we didn't get the Chapter 70 amount for those students. We only got $5,000. So the rationale didn't add up to me. But it is the same amount of money that it was when the law was put into effect.
Yeah, it's government. I expect rationale.
So this next screen is again a DESE screen. Last time I said I didn't want to remove part of the screen, but I did this time. They are saying that due to rapid increases in foundation because of the Student Opportunity Act, with the additional amount of money being applied, foundation budgets have increased. And because of such, more of the costs of those foundation budgets has been pushed to the towns. So what they're saying is here, 224 communities are below their target effort this year for 26. as compared to only 48 communities in FY '21. And 79 communities are eligible for excess effort means I'm going to say Beverly, Beverly or someone in a richer town, Dover, Sherborne, Weston, that's the one. I had a roommate.
$34,000.
So they're contributing more than the formula says they need to contribute. So they actually get a reduction in their required local contribution. There were 79 of those communities before, now compared to 201. So what it's really saying between the lines is the cost of education is being switched over to the communities rather than the state. And it's easy to see from 21 to 26 in 5 years how that has impacted the communities. As I usually do at this time, I go through the target share contributions of each of our towns. Sometimes these are highlighted in pink as they are on this screen. Sometimes they're in green because we have members of our community that were contributing more than the formula said they had to. Not happening this year. All of our communities are below target. I just point out to you in these highlighted areas, the calculations. In line 11, the calculation says that Barry should be paying 46.6% of the foundation budget in their required local contribution. On the right-hand side in line 16 is saying, well, they really can only afford 38.73%. So they're not meeting their target that the state had for them. And I'm not going to go through everybody's here. You can do that on your own, but everyone is highlighted for you. Oh, the next one is actually different, but everyone is highlighted for you to say where they should be contributing, what they can contribute at, and what they're going to be contributing towards FY '26. The second sheet behind here just takes that amount of money that is in line 27, what the money is. Where's the money? The money is in line 15. So Barry is going to contribute $4.5 million in required local contribution. The next sheet shows how it's spread between the districts that they belong to. So in Barry, that amount of money is split between Quabbin and Monty Tech on a per pupil basis. I've just provided that for each one of the towns here. Can you go through this? I've updated the history of the state aid and use of E&D. I'm doing just a 10-year look back here. I think I have the data back to FY '03 or '04. You can see the first part of the chart is chapter 70 from FY '17 to next year, and what the percent increase or decrease for chapter 70 has been. There's not a whole heck of a lot of money there for us. You see that it's in FY '25. We got a little bit of an increase because I believe we went up to, didn't we go up to $125 or $150 per student?
25, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what that is for. The next block is state aid, which includes chapter 70, reimbursement for transportation, charter reimbursement, MSBA, which you no longer have, and McKinney-Vento transportation. So state aid as a percentage, as an increase or decrease from the earlier year, again, we're not seeing very good numbers there. We keep losing money. Our year-end budget is actually in bold. You can see the increases or decreases to our budget, including debt. So when people say our budget keeps going up by 12%, there's the real increases that our budget has gone up. Their assessment may have gone up more, but that is not our budget. I then have for you the percentage of state aid as a percentage of the budget and its increase, and also add a column for the use of E&D as a funding source for our budget. I break that down a little bit further for chapter 70A, funding history from FY '02 to '26, just pulling out the percent increases for you, and chapter 70% increases and decreases for the last several years.
What's the percentage on state aid now?
Percentage of state aid for FY '26, state aid is 45% of our revenue source.
Okay, I'd like to point out that when I started, it was up in the high 60s to mid 70s, somewhere between 68 and 78%.
And I know it was much higher than this chart shows. Like I said, I have it going back several years. So state aid is a percentage of budget. In FY '02, it was 64.8%. We were getting 65% of our revenue was coming from the state. The other part was coming from district revenue or the member towns. Now we're down in FY '26. I have 45%. 45%. And who's going to make up the difference? The district doesn't have a whole lot more it can put in. It's going to the towns. It's into the town. I'll talk a little bit about the assessment formula, calculating assessments. Every form gave the option of using the statutory method, or districts could come together and create their own method of apportioning expenses to a budget. Quabbin uses the statutory method. The statutory method, and I keep talking about these, there's two main parts of the formula. Required local contribution, which Target Share is a part of, that is determined by Department of Revenue. And it is based on town numbers. The other part is the amount of budget that is over Chapter 70 plus the required local contribution. So the state aid and town aid, whatever the budget is over that, that gets shared amongst the member communities based on enrollment. So I always refer to the required local contribution as the base of the assessment. And then the community share is the next most important part of the assessment. Looking at the numbers for the current year and for next year, based on the governor's revenue and her budget, Barry's required contribution is going up by 5.5%. Hardwick 3.7, Hubbardston 4.6, New Braintree 5.8. It's highlighted for a reason, and Oakham 3.7. So on the average, we're going to get 4.7% more from our member towns. Take note of the largest increase in New Braintree. The other variable is the resident enrollment. We looked at this chart earlier, and I asked you to take a note of who had the only increase in students. New Braintree. Pop quiz, what community is going to have the largest increase in assessment? If you're getting the largest increase in the required local contribution, and you have the only increase in students, you're paying for a bigger share of the pie. And you'll see that that happens. This screen was here for a former town administrator. One member community is not able to identify their assessment and how it may change from fiscal year to fiscal year by looking at only their numbers, because the community share in the cost of the district's budget. So how one community's number change affects another community. So you saw that. I think you said who was it last year? Hubbardston's assessment was up the highest, but this year it's New Braintree's that's up the highest. You had more students and you had the highest increase in local contribution. We had last. So I've included this as well. I know this is small to see as well, but it's in a handout in your packet as well as it'll be posted online. This is kind of like what I call my cheat sheet on how to calculate assessment step by step. I've labeled it ABC, where the data comes from, what the source of the data is, and you can calculate out assessments. So I prepared this, I shared it with a former town administrator, and then he used it the next year, and he said, and the town finance committee chair said, we don't need you to give that, we can figure it out ourselves. I said, well, good luck, because you don't know how many students you have. So, you know, they tried, but they failed because they don't know how many students they have until I put it on the screen. But this is how it's calculated. It's really not mystery. All it is a big mathematical formula. So looking at our revenue sources that's going to support this general fund budget. This is coming, I think you also had this in your form. You have the revenue projected revenue sheet in your packet as well. It's in the drive as well. So our state aid is going up by less than 1%. You can see the first column is the change from this year. The next column is for FY25, then the governor's proposal, and then where we are right now. So our state aid is only going up by less than 1%. The district's revenue is actually going to go down because I made mention of this. We're only going to use $600,000 of E&D. We have only $881,000 certified E&D. We didn't want to get it too low. But this is not impacting assessments because we took that amount of money out of the budget to put it to rural school aid. So it's a net effect of 0 on the assessment in this budget proposal. The next slide looks at the member operating assessments, the required local contributions that I showed earlier, the amount of the share of the amount above, and where the total assessments are for member counts. If we go to the next one, it'll be bigger. I just took that screen out. So in budget proposal number 2, the operating assessments are an 8% increase to Barry, 3.75 to Hardwick, 6.7 to Hubbardston, 8.6 to New Braintree, and 4.3 to Oakham. So an average of 6.5%. Our budget is only up 3.56%. The average increase in assessment is 6.5. Why? Because we're not getting an increase in state aid. If you had $100 budget and it was a 50-50 split, $100 from the state and $100 from the town. I'm sorry, $50 from the state, $50 from the town. And your budget went up by 10%, but you got 0 from the state. Guess what the increase is to the town? 20%. That's very easy, clear, with no income coming from other sources and whatever. But that's what happens. When the increase of our budget, we're not getting as much from the state and their increases, it all shifts to the town. We've done a good job, I think, in keeping our budget down to a point where not everybody's going to be happy, but these aren't assessment increases in double digits like they have been in other fiscal years at this point in time. The last part of the projected revenues is the debt. I did mention that this is going down because we're on a declining debt schedule for both of our projects. So this shows at this point, balanced budget, revenue sources exactly matching what our budget proposal is at a 3.5% increase. I do have here, we thought that this would be a good screen to show to you where we have been in the last 2 years, last year, this year, and next year at this point in time. In FY24, our initial budget increase was 10.4% increase and the assessment average was 17%. We then transferred some expenses to rural school aid and ESSER 3 at the time. When we got to the April assessments, we transferred some more and used school property use for some expenses and stabilization. And we had that 4th round of the budget being approved at town meeting. The budget increased 5.96 and average assessment increase of 5.69. That was due to moving expenses, only no additional revenue. For the current year budget, we had an initial budget that didn't come to school committee. We knew we needed to reduce it before we even brought it to the budget subcommittee. So we actually started on proposal number 2, the preliminary budget at 6% increase, 12% increase to the town assessments. We then reduced the budget and reduced the assessments for proposal 3. And again, proposal 4 went to annual town meeting at a 3.08% increase, 5.7 average increase. We used more rural school aid there and grants and stabilization as well. And for this particular budget proposal for next year, as Mr. Wiggler said, we started out by the budget of 42.8 by using $750,000 in E&D. We are reducing that and offsetting it with rural school aid. So what I wanted to make sure that you knew here, it's important to note that a reduction in budget does not necessarily mean a budget cut, because there are operating expenses that can be funded with other sources and make a transfer. So the budget is reduced, but the cost didn't go away. It's just being paid with another funding source. And I mentioned 3 times now that the E&D reduction is not going to the towns. It is being offset with the use of another funding source. So our next steps, as we always do, we will review the data and determine where our programs are doing. We are kind of sticking to our guns on that new program creation at the middle high school. We'll see where that ends up. We prioritize. We look at programs and see if there's any more cuts that we can make. We have a few cuts on the table for some projects in different areas at the high school. We look at our resources. We know that usually, historically, the governor's budget gives us the less amount of aid. We're hoping we see, first of all, the supplemental budget for 25 from her, which will help us out in 26. And we're hoping that the House and the Senate will give us a little bit in our aid sources. And state and federal aid, contacting your legislators. I think Colleen spoke to her just in her opening statements. There's something out there called Project 211 plus 21. What that was when it started was there was 211 school districts in hold harmless aid. By the time they get to be heard, 21 more districts are in hold harmless aid. And that group as a total, Mars has been working on our behalf, working with the Mass Association of School Superintendents, MASBO, which is the School Business Officials Organization, and MTA, the Teachers Association, along with the American Federation of Teachers, to develop a funding proposal that will be heard on, I think you said March 24th.
Yep.
So at the hearings on March 24th at UMass, and what these agencies have said to us on our meeting that I think there was like 6 of us on. I said 3 or 4 the other day. I think 6 of us were on that meeting last week. They're asking for support from school committees, town officials, teachers, parents, even students to write letters, call your legislators, show up at this meeting and be heard. This is the first time that there's so many districts in hold harmless aid. They can't hear us. They have to hear us when we're that many of us saying, it's not working for us. Nobody from Springfield better be there because I'm going to seek them out. Where is the return on investment of 4 years of multi-million-dollar increases when our kids are getting $75? So this is a way for us to be heard, and hopefully we'll be seeing more money from the supplemental budget, change in the formula, hopefully, which will take probably centuries to get out from this, but a way in which we can get more money for our kids. So we're hoping that some of you can come to that meeting on the 24th. What are the next steps in the Commonwealth's process? Well, we're only at step 1 right now. The budget is at the House Ways and Means. We expect that to come out from the House in April. Everywhere where there's a golden dollar sign means that the numbers can change, not necessarily in a good way either. Sometimes aid goes up, but sometimes all of a sudden there's a shift of kids around the district. Don't know how that happens around the Commonwealth. Not sure how that happens this late in the time, but it does happen. Then the Senate Ways and Means budget comes out to the Senate. Hopefully we'll see that in June. If the Senate and the House don't match equally on those big numbers, Chapter 70, Chapter 71, if they go to conference committee, then of course, the governor has the right to veto and overrides in a final budget. Anywhere where there's a dollar sign, those numbers can change. If the enrollment changes, the foundation budget will change. That means Chapter 70 changes. That means minimum aid changes. Could mean that required local contribution changes, and we start all over again. That's a change in assessments. If we are at town meeting and we have a town that has passed their assessment, we do not have to redo all the numbers based on the new numbers. If you have there's been time we went through the first round and we didn't get any approval. If you're at that point, you have to use the next round of revenue figures in your calculations of assessments. So you have to pay attention to where we are when we go through the process. Hopefully we'll see more money, which will mean maybe not go cut as deeply. Because remember, when we do reductions in force, there's unemployment on the other side. That is all I have for tonight. We do have our email address, budget@qrsd.org is active. Any questions, comments, concerns can be sent to that email and it'll be funneled along to the correct person. Hopefully it's not addressed to me right yet. But any questions on anything tonight, feel free to send it to budget or cduval@qrsd.org. Did I do?
Any online questions at all?
Nope.
Any questions from folks in the room? I'm sure we're going to be talking about this. Yeah. My biggest concern is what's coming in cuts from the federal level, and how is that going to affect us down? Because I heard somebody talking about maybe it was Healy talking about like special ed resources. So I talked a little bit about special ed resources and, possibly cuts. So, we're gonna be talking about this again sometime.
Anyone else? Thank you, Cheryl, once again for a solid statements and outline from the beginning, middle, and end of how a budget is put together and the priorities, and then the limited revenues that we're getting. So I know there'll be a further in the meeting discussion of advocating as much as we can. And on the 21st, having the senator and the representative Berthium here, an opportunity for us to have a further discussion in regards to where we are with our towns. So thank you, Mark, and the presentation for the public hearing. But stay tuned. And once again, we are, Cheryl, I know that we're using rural aid to be able to offset and do those type of pieces. We're kicking physical plant issues down the road again. Here we are again. And then something the school committee is going to have to talk about down the road is if we don't get that press box and move forward, and we had people who gifted us. Here we are, where potentially could have had an opportunity for that, but the budgets are not allowing us to do that. I know we're all focused on the academics, but we also looked at the other parts of education of kids, and that's the extracurricular and sports and other opportunities.
Are the member towns going to be invited to the
Yes,
meeting as well?
yes.
Great.
They've been invited.
On the 21st.
Will there be a Zoom option available?
Did we talk about a Zoom option for the 21st?
We just kind of told them to save the date. We didn't talk
Yeah.
about it as an option.
I don't know that we'll do Zoom.
Yeah,
We'll
it
have to
might
think
be a-
about that.
Okay.
In
Yeah.
person on the 21st. And we're also inviting two for the 23rd,
Fourth.
24.
24th.
Yep, they're all
They'll also
invited.
have
We already
representatives
have
from.
three who would like to join
Join
us
us.
and
Good.
but speaking of that, we've got our sign up sheet for any of the members, so I know how many we'll have in the vans and who would like a t-shirt.
We're getting some great t-shirts that say, we are Quabbin, we are rural, we are regional, we are hold harmless, we need help. I wanted to say we're in the house. Yes.
So just a quick question, the drop dead date on Zoom is still out. The ability of community.
Oh, yes. Mhm.
It's like June.
Yes, yeah, we'll see if they extend it.
It looked like they might.
Mhm.
I think there's enough, public reaction and like the ability to be involved, whether they are or not, is basically not the case. It's more like.
Right.
Again, thank you for the public hearing. And like you mentioned, any comments, questions, feel free to email Cheryl's email that gave out, as well as reaching out to us. Let's just take a 2-minute break and we'll shift and we'll go back to the full committee. So just a couple of minutes, stretch. We're back out of recess. And now we'll go back to the agenda. First item on the agenda is the consent calendar. There are 3 items there, so if there's a motion to approve. Move and second it. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Roll call. Please.
Dr. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Marsh,
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps.
Yeah.
Mr. Lannon,
Yes.
Ms. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Garvey,
Yes.
Ms. Cartier,
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain,
Yes.
Ms. Mott,
Yes.
Mr. Wiggler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson,
Yes.
Mr. Nutter,
Yes.
Ms. LaRange,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. The only quick, superintendent, the last item, the acceptance of the $8,000 donation to Highwick Elementary for the Nature's Classroom. Any comment on that?
No, we received this donation last year as well. They donated it to the Hardwick Elementary School PTO from the Barry Charitable Foundation. So we want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. They also did an amazing fundraiser last Friday night. It was a student versus teacher basketball game. And so as you know, you need to approve accepting the donation. So the PTO will
So,
donate it.
Already did. Already did. Consent agenda.
oh,
I don't know if Principal Saltizik wants to say anything about that.
Yes, can you hear me okay? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, we were thrilled that the Berry Savings Charitable Foundation donated so much for us. We have a much larger group going than in the past. And from what I've learned, they've been extremely generous over the years. Senator Brewer came to present some of our students and the teachers with the check. And of course, if you know Senator Brewer, any time with him is entertaining. So we got stories about him, about growing up, and he's just thrilled to be somebody who can support this experience for these kids. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it to the basketball game. I did hear the teachers won. I did encourage them that they should play at half speed because they are the adults, but they weren't going to let anybody win. But it was a great time to be had by all. And it was actually the idea of a parent of a fifth grader, and she really pulled it all together. So we've given her lots of kudos for that. So it was a great time for everybody.
Emily, do you know what they raised for money that night?
It was about $1,000, I think just over.
Yeah.
So people donated snacks and water so people could buy things while they were there. And I believe it was $5 a person with a $10 cap for larger families.
Good. Fantastic. Student Advisory Council. Turn it over to the superintendent and then you.
We're going to start with Open Syed, if that's okay. So Drew Giese is our STEM coach at our middle high school. And he has brought some students and some teachers to talk about our new science program. You're going to hear a little bit more, or you'll see a little bit more in Shelley's report about how we're expanding that next year as well.
Right. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about our implementation of Open Syed here at Quabbin, to give you a little bit of a history regarding that and about what it looks like in our classrooms. So this is from Open Syed's mission. Their goal is to have engaged classrooms, both for to have the educators and the teachers being inspired to teach and motivating students through the activities. It's a research-based curriculum that's been aligned to provide hands-on and collaborative science learning. It's free and adaptable, and there's an asterisk by that free because that slide is coming up later on in the presentation. Okay, so all of their materials, print materials, things like that are all open access, teacher editions, all of that type of stuff is free. But we'll get to where the cost comes in to actually do the science in the classroom. It is standards aligned, meets the NGSS and the K through 12 frameworks. So they started out with a middle school curriculum, then they released their high school curriculum in full about a year ago. And then right now they have released about half of their elementary curriculum and the rest should be released by this summer. Everything that has been looked at in terms of high quality instructional material, from things like ed reports and from the NGSS itself, they've received all green lights in the ed reports, and they've received their design badges from NGSS. So it's a high quality curriculum. Lots of work has gone into this, lots of field testing to make sure that it's going to be usable for students and teachers. Really quickly, if you're not familiar with what three-dimensional learning is, all of the units incorporate the disciplinary core ideas, which are the basic concepts that are fundamental to that science, like understanding atomic structure, understanding the structure of DNA, sort of your classic, what you think of as standards. They also interweave science and engineering practices into the three-dimensional model. And those are the behaviors, those are the actual things that scientists do. So the actual engineering, the actual lab work, the practical aspect of it, of these ideas. And then the third dimension is the cross-cutting concepts. So those are the things that apply to multiple fields and looking for things like patterns and sort of that aspect, like looking for patterns in the periodic table and how that influences chemistry and biology and things like that. So in our classrooms, and this is one of the units that they did at the beginning of the year in 6th grade. This is looking at how can containers keep stuff from warming up and cooling down. So they look at real world situations and they model those situations to try to explain the phenomenon. And so one of the things that they have is a cold cup challenge to try to see if they can design a cup to keep beverages colder longer or warmer for a longer period of time. Lots and lots of hands-on investigations. Basically, the investigations can be short, like 10 minutes, or they could be like a 30-minute to 40-minute investigation. It all depends on what you're doing that day. And then lots and lots of collaborative work and discussions between students, so they're making sense of the science with each other. They're not just listening to somebody give them facts and repeating those facts. All right, so it's a very engaging, collaborative, discovering the science as they come to it. This is a crazy model. This is from Open Syed. They call it the worm sometimes because it's kind of like, what's going on here? All right. So for the middle high school, each unit follows a theme where the students look at an anchoring phenomenon. And then they look at that phenomenon, they think about how it relates to their own world and things around them. And then they start to ask questions about it. They ask questions that then get categorized into a driving question board. And those questions help navigate where the students will actually do their investigations. So the investigations then are sort of, there's a process to them where the teacher is going to sort of guide those investigations based on the students' driving questions. And the students will be able to investigate through laboratory exercises to learn more about this phenomenon that they've explored and ask questions about. They'll start to put the pieces together and make what's called a consensus model, where they'll come to an idea of how are they explaining this? And when they do that, they end up going through what's called a problematizing routine, where it's like, okay, we had these questions in the beginning, we figured some stuff out, now we have more questions, and we're going to do some more investigation. And so they'll do some more investigation to try to get to the final answer in terms of what the phenomenon is and how it relates to other phenomena. This is really just only 4 of the units. There are 5 to 6 units per grade level in the middle and high school. In the elementary school, there are 4 units per grade level. Okay. So some of the things, just to give you sort of an idea, in 4th grade, they're looking at what causes the Earth's landscape to change and how those changes impact humans. So what happens with things like tsunamis and earthquakes, and how does that impact the people that live in coastal areas? How does that impact other organisms? Things like that. In high school, they're looking at who gets cancer and how do we treat cancer and how can we talk about cancer to increase funding and things like that to continue research. And so then they're really getting into DNA structure, genetics. They're looking at tumor suppressor genes to kind of figure out what is it about cancer cells that's gone awry and how can we tackle that. In high school chemistry, they're in this unit right now. They're looking at what causes lightning and where are the places that are safer and more dangerous if you're in a lightning storm. And so they're looking at how charge distribution works in the clouds and how that then can transfer into energy through lightning. And, they look at a phenomenon where my last name is Giese, so they kind of make fun of me, one of the teachers. They look at a phenomena in the Great Lakes where there were like 30 geese down that were dead. And it's like a mystery at first to be like, what happened? And they investigate to look at how lightning travels through water and things like that using chemistry. And then eighth grade physical science, something we're all very familiar with, dropping your cell phone and breaking it and cracking the screen. The phenomenon really gets to the students because they're like, oh yeah, look at my screen, look at mine, all this kind of, everybody's got, half their screens are broken, but they're still using them. And so why do some things get damaged when they fall and when they hit each other? So this is really getting to the physics of collisions and momentum and forces. So a little bit of history in terms of grant support that we've received in the past. So in fiscal year 24, we received a competitive grant from DESE to implement Open Syed in the middle school. And then this last year, for this current year that we're in right now, we received a grant from the Mass Life Science Center in the amount of $68,400. And what that's being used for is it's used for professional development for our staff. So things like summer launches and curriculum PD, new teacher and new to the district teachers. So we may have had somebody teaching it for a while, but we have somebody coming in from another district and they've never used Open Syed. There's a lot of training that goes into that process. We also have expert consultants. If anybody would like to come see next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So Monday we have Dr. Rob Stevenson from the Michigan Math and Science Leadership Network. And he's been one of our primary consultants. He's coming next week for the elementary. He'll be here all day Monday. And then he's coming to the middle school on Tuesday and the high school on Wednesday. We've also sent teachers to the NSTA workshops that are unit specific so they can kind of dive in deep to whatever topic they're coming to next. The other half of the money typically goes to the actual materials. So this is where, when I said it was free, the curriculum is free, but actually doing the activities every day, having the materials is not a free endeavor. So we have purchased full classroom kits. Those contain permanent items and consumable items. And again, I put an asterisk there by permanent because even though some of the things say that they're permanent, like let's say we have dynamic carts for like physics and they're crashing them into each other and I get 25 for each, middle school class. At the end of the year, those 50 carts, not all of them are in perfect working order. So, they get dropped, they go too fast and hit walls and things like that. So not everything is permanent, but we also have the consumables, and that's all to support project-based learning. These grants, though, I must say, have been used really to purchase a lot of this durable and permanent equipment. And the hope is that as we progress through Open Syed and we establish that base of durable items, it's really just the replenishment over the years that becomes the cost. So there is that initial sort of getting the big supplies, and then there's sort of the little things that you have to keep ordering that can become part of our regular budget. Quick history. We started with Open Syed as a pilot in the middle school in 22 and 23. And then we went to full implementation last year in grades 6 through 8. And then we are continuing to support all of our middle school teachers through coaching and through professional development opportunities. In 2023, we piloted the biology high school units, and this year we are implementing all of the biology units in our classrooms, and we're piloting the chemistry and physics units as well. This pilot for chemistry is more of a full pilot. This is a unit-specific pilot with our teachers. Next year, the goal is to implement the biology, chemistry, and physics units across the high school as well. Our elementary schools, this year, the 4th and 5th grade teachers, so 5 teachers are implementing the first 2 units of 4th and 5th grade for the elementary. And next year, the plan is for all of the teachers in 4th and 5th grade to implement those units and to have a pilot in grades K through 3. So a lot of people have asked me the question, why did you start at middle school? Like, why didn't you start at elementary? It's the way that it was released by Open Syed. And I actually think that it was a good strategic thing that they did. Because I think if you released it all in high school, then elementary would see it as, oh, it's a high school curriculum. This is going to be, you know, top down, hard to figure out. If they had done it in just elementary school, then high school teachers may have been like, this is an elementary thing. This isn't at our level. So the middle school implementation, they kind of both got to see the practices and the successes. And now it can be implemented fully. And again, this is how they released it through Open Syed. So we are still waiting for a couple of units to come out of elementary that will be available by the end of the summer. Really quickly, some examples of vertical alignment and spiraling in Open Syed. So this is a kindergarten unit where they look at plants and animals and their environment. And it's just simply starts like, why do we have signs up at the park or the lake that say don't feed the birds or don't feed the animals? And it starts to make them question, like, can they survive on their own? Should people be intervening to help? And that's in kindergarten. And so that progresses into looking at the habitats and biodiversity in different environments. Progresses into fourth grade, where they're starting to look at structure and function. And yes, this is a squirrel showing you its hand. And so how do they climb trees? What's special about the structure? How does that work? How do they eat? Things like that. And that's sort of at the organism level. And then that connects into our middle school, which Ms. Freeland will be doing towards the end of this year, cells and systems, where they look at a student that has an injury and they start looking at tissue repair and how cells actually repair themselves, how blood works. They start to look at sort of that cellular level, a little bit more of the organ level. And then in seventh grade, they look at metabolic reactions. So they investigate an actual student named McKenna that has a lot of fatigue and headaches and things like that. And they investigate to find out what's going on in her digestive system to cause that, so that they can learn more about organ systems at the tissue level. And then finally, looking at the chemistry that comes into play in middle school here, it gets, there's vertical alignment with the high school as well, because they start looking at chemical reactions and how chemical reactions affect water quality, how chemical reactions affect organisms in the water, and what we can do to change that. This is just the scope and sequence for K through 5. It's just, I just put it in as a slide so that you get an idea of all the different topics that students are looking at. And again, there's 4 per grade level. They also have intentionally put literacy and math practices into their science units, so that a lot of what is actually done in the science classroom can count as math minutes or as literacy minutes, okay? In middle school, again, it's 6 units level, and they're weaving in physical science, earth and space science, and life sciences into each grade level. And this is just showing the connections between all of them, how the sequence works and how things build upon each other, sort of for that spiraling. High school, basically biology, chemistry, and physics. These are your core science classes in high school. And what they've also done is interspersed things about earth and space into that. All right. Really quickly, their assessment system is really the students looking at the phenomenon and making ideas. They start to build understanding. They do some argumentative writing, like claim, evidence, reasoning. They have consensus models that they work on and receive feedback on. There's usually a midpoint transfer task, where the transfer task, that's kind of a new word for some people as well, they're looking usually at one phenomena and then they try to see how does this apply to like another organism? And it's to try to test the students on, can they take the information they've learned here and apply it to a new situation? Right, so with that, enough of me talking. Wanted to introduce you to Miss Emily Freeland, one of our sixth grade science teachers. She's going to kind of just give you her perspective on Open SciEd. This is her second year of implementation in sixth grade. And also I'm going to have you chat really quickly with Mr. Jason Castano, one of our sixth grade students, who seems to be really enjoying Open SciEd, and he has the unique experience of he didn't have Open SciEd last year, but he has it this year. All right. So either one want to start and just tell me a little bit about your experience.
Sure. So I'd love to start just by saying how much I love this curriculum. So in previous years, I've taught math and science. This curriculum is a little bit different because when I was in school, as many I'm sure of us had, it was in science. Here's some vocabulary words. Maybe we watch a video and then you learn it, repeat it back. This program is a lot of hands-on activities. So a lot of what the kids are doing is actually seeing something happen and they're asking why. So why is that happening? And so we may create a model of what we think might be happening individually, and then we come together as a team and come up with a model of what we collectively think. And then we can ask questions, and iteratively as we go through each unit, we can make adjustments, which is really great to see their thinking evolve throughout any of the units. And my favorite part, I think, is how it has kind of changed the climate of a classroom, because we work collaboratively on pretty much everything. We do a lot of conversation about what we think could be going on. We work together when we're watching videos to see what are we noticing and what does it make us wonder. So a lot of this is really embedded in conversation and thinking, you know, what we actually think when we're looking outside. Do we think about why it's raining? Do we think about why the ground is the way it is, or why the weather is changing, or why my leg hurts if I fall off a bike? So it's a really nice to see how the actual mood of the classroom can change as we work as a team, instead of saying, I got a better grade than you. It's more of like, oh, I noticed that. Did you see that too? So the curriculum is really good for working together and then building off of each other's ideas. And it even benefits students who maybe don't come to the table with an idea right away, hearing other people say, oh, that makes me think of this. Maybe they have a unique experience that they can also bring to the table. So it's a really great curriculum, and I'm excited to see, hopefully, like when there's experience with the younger kids as they come up with some of these words and experiences, how we can flourish kind of even more from where we are now.
In 13 years, when we had your time. No, but it really is great. And the way that it's structured is, if you really dive into like elementary, middle, and high school, it's like in elementary school, you learn a little bit about light and you learn a little bit about sound, or you learn something about basic collisions. And then in middle school, they revisit that. And now they're looking at collisions between objects, and they're thinking about things that do get damaged, some that don't get damaged, things that bounce off perfectly, things that don't. They go into more detail. And then by the time they get to high school, they're really looking at like Newton's laws, and they're getting into the forces of motion. And so it really does have that progression, and you can tell when you look at it how intentional it was. So Jason.
Yes.
Yeah. So just tell us a little bit about I don't know, maybe your favorite unit so far this year in sixth grade.
My favorite unit has been thermal energy, because after we learned about thermal energy, we've used it in every single unit after.
Stand up.
So after we learned about thermal energy, we used it in every other unit so far. So like in the rock cycle, we learned how rocks creep and how thermal energy has to do with that. Because when it gets hotter, the more thermal energy there in the rocks, they liquefy and they creep.
Yep.
That's where we are right now.
Yes.
We have more to go.
Perfect. So you, as I mentioned in the beginning, you didn't have Open SciEd in elementary school. Have you noticed anything different having Open SciEd in sixth grade versus not having it?
Yes, it's more hands-on and more collaborative.
Okay,
And like we can share our ideas more.
okay. Great. And any ideas for things you might want to do in science? Any goals, aspirations, career ideas?
Yeah, when I'm older, I want to be a chemical engineer.
Ooh.
Okay. Great. And so, I think that it's really preparing our students for those higher level classes. And if we also have Project Lead the Way. And so those classes where those projects are happening, in the upper grades that are more focused on like the engineering and like the career track aspect, I think our students are going to be much more prepared for that. And those classes students will get much more out of those classes if they've come from the background where they've had that three-dimensional learning. Anything else you want to add?
Pretty much it.
Good. Thanks so much for coming.
Any questions for Jason?
Jason, how often do you have this class every day?
Have it super often.
Every day?
Yeah, every day.
Every day, very good. Thank
We
you.
learn new stuff every day too.
Very nice. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Deb?
How do you like being up at the middle high school in sixth grade?
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
We learn a lot more, like about science.
Yeah.
We go like in a deeper level than we used to.
How about overall, your sixth grade experience?
It's nice.
Yeah, you think you were ready for it?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you feel welcome and part of the community? Great. Good to hear. Thank you.
My question is just on the shared collaborative part.
Yeah.
Your experience in elementary school with the science opportunities was as active, or do you find this year's curriculum a better perspective of teaching the science and the concepts?
A better perspective, because when we in fifth grade there was like no curriculum to go based off of, so we kind of did our own projects.
Yep.
It was mostly like about like we each had our own project instead of all collaborating and having like sharing our ideas back and forth.
Do you feel like you're learning more then?
Yes.
And then obviously access to your colleagues, meaning your peers,
Yeah.
and the teachers.
Yeah.
You feel there's enough access for if something was not sticking as well or not working as well,
Yes.
are those folks and your peers available?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Jason, is this whole crowd with you?
Yes.
What a support. No doubt you will reach all your goals with everyone behind you. That is wonderful.
Introduce us. Jason, introduce us.
With you.
Yeah.
Who's with you?
My mom, my aunt, my uncle, my amazing cousin,
Whoa.
my main boyfriend.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Jason, Mr. Carlson has a message for you. So he's online and he typed in the chat. What did he say?
Great to hear from you, Jason.
Same to you, Mr. Carlson.
There he is.
There he
It's flashing somehow, but.
Yeah.
Jason went to Ruggles Lane. Jason went to Ruggles Lane, and he is one of the most polite, respectful young men that you'll ever meet. So I'm glad to see that he's got the platform, he's got the stage here at school committee. So well done, Jason. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Maybe we can investigate this phenomenon
I know.
that's happening.
It's been happening for a few months.
The first unit of the year actually he would be able to tell you why we see the reflection in the darker parts of the screen and not where there are people showing up. So that is one of the first phenomena we talk about in the year.
Yeah, and why people could see us in here with the lights on, but with the lights off, you couldn't, and why they'd see themselves, and that's their first one. Yeah.
Lee?
So I have some non-Jason questions, if that's okay. How confident are you of getting grants going forward in this atmosphere?
So in this atmosphere, I think it's going to be really challenging. We are applying for a continuation grant from Mass Life Science Center. The thing about that grant is that it's very narrow in terms of what they'll allow us to use the money for. So they're named Life Science Center. They want us to only spend money on life science units in Open Science, which is about a third of the curriculum. So it does support that, and we can use the PD to give professional development. If we do PD, we don't say like, oh, you can't come because you're not a life science teacher when we're learning about Open Science. That applies to everybody. But in terms of ordering the materials and things like that, we have to be very careful because we can't order, something like we're doing a physics unit. We can't order that stuff through their grant. And I think that there will, hopefully, fingers crossed, be an elementary implementation grant once the full curriculum is released. But I just don't know yet. When you look at the grants page, it used to be like this and you can look through it. Now it's like this. And you're like, oh, okay. So yeah, and like I said, there's that initial cost to sort of get the materials, get the training, and then it's sort of backfilling from there. But we put the money to really good use. We have, like, even now, with middle school, we don't need to buy whole kits or anything like that. We can just be like, okay, what did you guys throw away and what did you use? And we're just going to order that. And the cost is like, 20% of what it was to buy the kits. And the kits too come from companies and they need to make a profit too. So sometimes we use Amazon and things like that because it's like we can piece together a kit on our own and not have to pay somebody an extra $500 or $1,000 stuff. But yeah, grants, as you guys know, it's there's not a lot going on right now. Any other questions?
Fantastic.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jace.
Good job.
Thank you for being patient with us. I know we had the public hearing and.
It's nice and warm in here. We got Friday tomorrow. We're all happy.
Oh yeah, I know.
All right, now we'll do, Ruby, because Ella has to leave. Anything to report? Anything to share?
So basically, I heard when we were going through your report, the mention of the DECA Club. I just wanted to relate to you guys the awesome news about 2 members from the DECA Club ended up advancing into the international competition, and they'll be going to Orlando, Florida in April to compete. Just thought that was important.
Which two? The DECA.
Luke Salvador and Quinn Geary.
Great team.
Good for them.
Those are
Great kids.
fantastic.
Okay.
We need to get approval for that. We will have to do that. We will have to do approval for that trip tonight. It's not
Okay.
on the agenda because it's a last minute, like they just finally got everything.
They just finally got it?
Yeah, but we can vote on it tonight because it is no,
Okay, so I
don't know if you want to wait until new business, but
we'll do it a new business.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anything else? Ruby,
No, that's all.
thank you. Administrative reports. Superintendent.
So all of our directors put their information into the report. I think if you have any questions, if you look through that, they're happy to answer that. I think our focus that we just really want to communicate to you right now is our advocacy for increased funding. So I want to just sort of inform you of some of the steps that we've taken and will continue to take. I think in the drive, there is a letter. Did we put that in the drive, Jeff?
I have not, I can.
Okay, we're going to put a letter in the drive that they really, Mass Association of Regional Schools is really encouraging us to personalize it. So to tell a story about what it's like in your district, in comparison perhaps to other districts or something you may have experienced that probably is a result of being regional, rural, hold harmless. So we're sending that to all of you. We're asking you to write letters. We're sending it to our towns. We're also going to be sending it to our students. So Isabel Copiello, you might remember she was a rep last year. She's my student intern. We're working on a form. Mr. Walsh is going to help us that will take student responses and feed it into a form letter so that it personalizes it for the students. But one thing Isabel identified that was unique for her was she had to take an online virtual course because we didn't have enough students to offer that course in person. So those are some challenges that are real for our kids. And a few years ago, some of our students took AP chemistry, if you can believe it, virtual. And Mr. Devine was running around trying to get them their materials so they could do their experiments at home. So things like that. We are not just going to send a lot of letters. We're going to try and send a lot of really meaningful letters to the legislators. So we'll be working on that. As I said, we scheduled lunchtime with Representative Berthium and Senator Durant, 11 a.m. on the 21st here at the PDC. The following Monday, we will go out to UMass Amherst. Again, we are seeking students to come with us. So I'm going to be sending letters to our, obviously, our invitations to Ella and Ruby, Isabel, Luke, and then some of the class officers, I'll send them through Miss Marinelli. And as many students as can join us, we'll be taking our vans and bringing them with us. What we expect when we get to UMass and Amherst is that we are not going to speak. So none of us are going to get to testify. However, all of the associations that have been working together to get this legislation passed believe that they're going to be sort of in a panel format where they'll be able to state all the reasons why they're advocating and we'll be able to stand behind them. But we are expecting a break in the day where some of our representatives, our legislators may come around and ask questions. So I was thinking it might be a good idea to have a day next week where we sort of come together and talk about the Quabbin story so that everybody feels like they're well-versed and ready to go. So we'll send that out to you guys too, just so that we feel like we're prepared. I wouldn't want any student to feel caught off guard, like I don't know how to respond, or honestly, any of you, right? Sometimes they ask you a question, you're just not sure. So I thought about even potentially doing like a one-pager, sort of like about Quabbin. And Cheryl kind of gave us some of it already. We are 2138 students, 23 buses, 23 vans. Like that's important information. Helps them see sort of what we're all about. So that's really the focus of the work that we're trying to do right now, although we have a lot of things happening. And the only other thing that I really just want to highlight, and it goes back to budget. So when we mentioned that there were 6 reduction in force, what I want to make sure that I express to you, because this is the hardest part about these decisions, is that these are not positions we don't need. What it means is we had to make a hard choice and a hard decision about where we were going to reduce. And what that does mean is the work in some of these roles is going to be transferred to other people. So I just want to state that because I think sometimes it can appear that it's sort of like, oh, you don't need that. And I also just want to call out the fact that some of the things we identified as our priorities at the start of that slide deck were all around special education, social emotional health. And those were some of the really hard decisions we had to make. So it is not easy, but we're doing it. Any questions about any aspect of the director's report?
No. Yeah, just a comment. I got back last night from New Orleans. I was at the Association of Teacher Educators. I sponsored their leadership academy and they had me give a talk and all. Talk about social emotional. They don't have any of their original schools left. They're all charter schools. And the kids, I was down there, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe. We visited the 9th ward, one of the 2 high schools in town. And the kids had to leave early, some of them, to get their siblings in elementary school because they didn't know where their family was. We have problems we need to deal with. Absolutely, but there is a perspective. And I think we're doing what we can for the kids that we can. But we need to keep in mind, I mean, think about some of the other people, other kids, other children, other families, such as they are and what they're going through. I mean, it was really, really an impact. We had speakers from Xavier and University of New Orleans and so forth, and they're talking about, they're doing a nice job. The programs they're putting together to try to get teachers and try to do something for these kids and all. So.
Anything else for the superintendent?
We had a grand opening of the community closet over in New Braintree. It was a big hit. That was one of our first customers. So they're open Mondays, 12 to 2. If you or anyone you know, they just love foot traffic. So they like being able to talk to people who come in for any reason. So even if you aren't there because you need something, they had some cookies to sell, they'll keep having those. And just go visit them because they are joy and light.
Okay. School business manager?
Unfortunately, I got kicked out, so I have to get back in. I noticed over the last several months that the school business manager report was very short. And actually, I didn't even fill this one in. Do you have enough of this?
I think Stacy filled it in.
I think it was filled in. So all I have is the warrants. Most of my time since I've been back has been working on the budget, like 99% of my time. But we do have payroll warrants for biweekly payroll 18 and 19, for weekly payroll 33, 34, 35, 36. And accounts payable, I see she's dropped the letters that I always had so much fun reading, 58, 61, 62, 63, 64, and 65.
Can we put all into the consent?
Get those letters back.
I don't even know what that is.
Carol,
Excuse me?
suddenly they're coming to my house on consistently the same days at the same time. No, I look for them now. Tuesday was the big day. It used to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Well, that's something.
Carol's back. They're coming in on Tuesday.
You also saw 3 or 4 of them or 5 of them. When it should have been one of them.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, now we have subcommittee reports, budget, we're took care of, unless Mark, anything else?
Not really, just.
Okay.
Interesting going forward, I think.
Okay. Collective bargaining?
Yes, one thing, we both the custodians and the office managers have requested that we open negotiations with them, and Nancy Landry sent out an email, or I sent out an email, and I sent out an email to the committee. And Nancy had listed some dates that she'd like to walk out. So I know Walter responded and Kevin Clark responded. I forget who else, but if you do, I did too, yeah. So if we can look at those dates, and it's 5 meeting dates. And we can get started, the end of March and the beginning of April. Both are represented by the same union, and I'm assuming it's gonna be the same
rep,
technical rep.
Yes.
I think she was with us, if it's the same person.
No, she's new. Yeah, brand new.
Okay. Policy review and reform?
Okay. The Title IX. To quote Hamlet, like the crab has scuttled backwards. There are new Title IX policies have been replaced, rescinded, redacted, reduced. In other words, kicked in the trash can. And we're back to where we were. And this was just information, FYI, kind of stuff to us, let us know. We had very interesting discussions. The first, help me out, LBG.
CQ plus.
Yeah, right. We had a student that falls in that category. We're not going to use names because we're not going to use names. She's a seventh middle grade student, and she was talking to us about her experiences, support, the lack of support, our policies, how they worked for her, how she felt about what we were doing, not doing, could do, so forth. And I think all of us there were incredibly impressed with she was on the verge. She's a seventh grade girl. She's talking to a bunch of old fuddy-duddies. She's talking about a very intensely personal issue to her and how her life was in our environment and how it existed. And she handled it all the way through. On the verge the whole time, but she did that, and it was very impressive. Now, there's the downside. She talked about her concerns about belonging and what that meant. Microaggression, which is a term I didn't even know, but I can envision it. And she found school, but also there were some teachers and school administrators that she was able to talk to and go get some support from, which I know she was trying to help us understand the circumstances. But I found some comfort in the fact that we had not ignored. We do have policies in place. There were some people that she could talk to. She had some ideas or comments or suggestions. Colleen stepped up nicely. And the conclusion was that they were going to be talking together about what this meant, what it had impacted, how it had impacted her and those around her. So ultimately, while it's not a topic we talk about, really, but it certainly exists in the schools. And we want all of our kids, some of them, all of our kids, to belong, to feel that this is a place where they can exist and so forth. And we were very impressed with this girl and her willingness to come and talk to us and kind of, I don't know how much was knowledge and how much was emotion on what we could gain and garner from this. But it was good for us to have this presentation and experience. Athletics. We have a new policy. We reduce the policy a little bit. And Mark Weigel came and talked to us and basically said, seems to be a good thing. Seems to be working. Seems to be getting a few more kids involved and active that perhaps wouldn't otherwise. And as it, maintain the course. Allison Sprinkle. She was to talk to us about cell phones. And I thought she was going to have it because we had discussions already in the meeting that the state is, and then we're going to disallow and they blah, blah, blah. But we talked about this and I think she's from Ware, isn't she?
She's a school choice student from Ware, yes.
That's, I think, what I said, yes. She's from Ware and she's doing a study. And so the purpose was not to lobby us, but to garner some opinions for her study. And the discussion widened greatly.
Sure did.
From that. It sure did. Yes, that's probably the best summary we could have. But it seems like pretty much the kids, they have them in the hallways, they go into class, they put them in a park. They leave the class, they take them out. That seems more or less to be okay. Is it the best? We're not sure. But it seems to be working. In some classes, the teachers don't Don't do that. Now, the question was, well, seems to me if the teacher is not enforcing that particular policy, then that's, the teacher must feel comfortable in that classroom setting with those kids, and they must not be abusing it, one would think. But anyway, this is one of those ongoing sorts of things. There's no right answer or wrong answer on cell phones right now at this point. Dual enrollment. I was hoping we'd have more kids. We were expecting to have more kids, but there's the this and the that and the other and so forth. It didn't happen. But we had this girl, I think, close to 2 years of college. At the end of this year, she'll have something close to 2 years of college. Goes to college, you only has to pay for 2 years instead of 4 years. Wow, great. It seems to be a good program. It seems to be one that needs more publicity, more emphasis, more push, more get behind and do it. So those were the things that we did. Communication, yes, that's part of the more emphasis, that's the.
Oh, okay, thank you. It was clear.
Little body language there.
Perfect.
More or less. I have enough words, I guess. But the more we can get kids along the way and down the road, the better off we are. It's not as smooth as it needs to be. They don't get information. There's a notice in the morning that's about something in the afternoon. Well, they're off at Quincy, or they're off at the Mount, or wherever. And how do they find out about what and so forth? That's a bit of an issue. But we have a superintendent of schools, and she was there, and she's going to help overcome that particular issue.
Actually, Principal DeMarias already has a solution. She implemented, I think, Monday, right, Purnima?
Purnima, are you there?
Hi there. Here.
All right, well, Purnima, tell us about what you promised and what you did.
So I heard loud and clear, and we do have a demanding need where students are going not only to dual enrollment, but to community service hours, internships. They do miss morning announcements at times. It does make sense. So I have worked with the Media Center's fabulous Christy Minton, who's our library media specialist. And she's the one who conducts our announcements. And now in Aspen, so every student, when they open their Chromebook and log in to Aspen, the morning announcements are going to be digitized and written in a folder, which will be basically archived for several days. So if a student is absent or away for that morning announcement, they can look back for the last 2 weeks or so, and all the announcements will be there. And we're trying to add in links as well. So any place where there is specific and detailed information, we're going to be adding those links. So it doesn't matter if you're absent. It doesn't matter if you're away to dual enrollment. You will have a digitized version every day in your Aspen folder.
And Tima, you do such a nice job. Thank you.
Thank you for all your support.
I like to add on that too. It's actually also available to the parents in Aspen who've got their Aspen access too. So that's also helpful as well. I did notice that looking at my daughter's grades in Aspen.
Awesome.
Good. But when we had the meeting, Purnima said, "Oh, I'm going to get right on that."
And she did.
And she did. That's why.
Great job.
Now, you'll notice we had a meeting in March. We don't do that. But Colleen told me we had stuff to talk about. Me and my mother-in-law. You have things to do. Okay, so we had some things to do. So that's the report.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
Yeah, I just have a question. I guess I'm a little concerned about the comments on some teachers really not getting into the cell phone thing. And, it can be self-serving as a teacher. Because if you have some problem students in your class, you let them go off and do their cell phone thing during the course, and you don't really have to, bust their chops and make sure that they're listening to what you're talking about. So why don't we write this into collective bargaining?
I also had an issue with that at the
Big
meeting.
issue.
I did.
I think, so just to, we hear from students, right? And so we need to evaluate the situation by allowing our administrators to go through, which they're doing, walking through those classrooms and seeing, is this happening? Where is it happening? So that we can make sure we're addressing those things and we have a truer picture of what's happening. One thing we definitely identified was that substitute teachers, when they're in those classrooms, are not holding to the same standard of having students put their cell phones in the pouches. So I think if you can give us a little grace, our middle high school administration is going to have some data and we can report that data back out to you so that you feel better about exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think one thing too is, I think we all gravitated towards the worst case scenario, but she also said some kids have watches and so they put their phone in and they're on their watch. So I don't think it's necessarily teachers being like, I don't feel like doing that. I think it's somebody have a burner phone because kids always find a workaround. So I don't think it was necessarily the worst case scenario, but we'll find out.
We definitely need more information.
And I think my
Wait.
issue was obviously with the cell phone policy because we set that, but overall policy, why do we set policy? They're not to be picked and chosen which ones to follow. So to me, that was more troublesome. And I know, it's like anything, you can't enforce it with everyone, but it was a little eye-opening and I agree with you.
Yeah, I think the general consensus of the subcommittee was policy should be followed. I was personal editorializing.
Lee?
Yeah, just to spin a little into the young lady who came to speak with us. Microaggressions are just so insidious. And that's the problem, because if standing alone, they would almost be nothing. And if you're going to go to a teacher, administrator, an adult, it's easy to brush somebody off because maybe the student is not going to articulate the progression of the microaggressions. They may hit on one of them. They may be embarrassed to articulate further what's going on. And the problem is we can't do anything about it. We really, as a group, there's nothing we can do about it. And it permeates everybody. It permeates workplaces. There are adults who have microaggressions thrown at them and they have issues with it. We just have to hope that our teachers, administrators, can recognize that, oh, this is some silly thing that, deal with it or, well, if it happens again, come to me or something like that. I mean, I would just hope that happens because, I think a lot of us have dealt with microaggressions and really, it can really tick you off. But we, seventh, eighth, ninth graders, even kids younger, it's tough for them to deal with this. And we have to make sure that, we recognize them for what they are. And at the very least, help students to handle it because you're not going to be able to stop them, but at least, some sort of part of the learning process or absorb, okay, you need to try and handle this. It's a bullying. It's a bullying tactic. And you have to make sure that you're there for that student if in fact it's really bothering them. You can't just fluff something off because it doesn't seem like a big deal.
I agree. And when you have the environment and the culture and climate that you recognize that people are safe, whatever that is, and then that I can't control your behavior, but at least if I can get in an environment where, I'm aware of what I may say or hurt others to realize maybe I will do less of that. I may or may not, but hopefully through that, and that's through the culture, climate, and the environment of a good teacher and staff and leadership kind of move up in that environment to be safe.
Yeah.
We did training, and I think the school committee had some training too, right?
Yeah.
So our teachers all had training with Dr. Khalees Warnham, and she taught a a strategy of marking the moment. So when a microaggression occurred, to mark the moment and how to, call it out in a way that didn't feel threatening. But what I realize is that training at this point was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so many of our newer teachers, our staff has really changed. May not have had microaggressions somewhere else. And so it is absolutely something we need to get back to. Many of our teachers really doing, a nice job with that. But some of them are just not comfortable. And I know our elementary teachers, say to students all the time, when they're called out on something, if you have to say you're sorry, that's, you should not have said that in the first place, right? That was hurtful.
Good. Ella, anything on that?
Ruby.
Ruby. Ruby, I'm sorry, Ella left. Anything that you'd like to share and not putting a spot, but if you feel comfortable?
Well, talking about the phone policy, I think whether or not you guys have observed that phones are in the pouches or if students have them in their bags or not, I feel like I've noticed like a different culture about having phones. So like, I feel like maybe 2 years ago, if we had some free time at the end of class, like the last 2 minutes, people would just take out their phones and like look on their phones for the last 2 minutes. But I think now, if students were put in that position, it wouldn't be the same. I think that students would be more driven to not have the opportunity first, but also engage in those conversations with their peers, I think, yeah.
Thank you. Regional agreement update.
Oh, that's me. We met a couple of weeks ago. We had our first kickoff meeting. I think all but one was unable to attend because of an emergency. So we had like silent representatives. We had representatives from one member of each of the school committee members as representing each town, and another member of each town was chosen, and then the silent members. So we basically kind of went through the history of the regional agreements, and then we went kind of through our entire agreement and kind of just did like a quick preview of changing, some notes that just some terminology and kind of housekeeping issues. The attorney was present for the meeting. Colleen did a great job welcoming everyone and explaining the process and keeping us on task and time. And it was a lot for everyone to absorb. It was for some the first time seeing anything like this. So our next meeting is next Tuesday at 6:30.
Yep.
And I think we're gonna have a deeper discussion, because now everybody will have time to kind of digest everything and look over the regional agreement. So I don't think though, from the feeling of the group, I really feel like I think it's gonna go smoothly. I don't know that there's gonna be a whole lot of recommendations. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I think it maybe some language changes or things, but I think overall, I think we have a pretty decent agreement now. So we'll see what the next meeting brings. I'm looking forward to better discussions.
Good. I know we're supposed to, or we did, I guess, send our current agreement to somebody in the Department of Education who they were going to look at and tell us how good or bad we were. Did we get that back? Do we have any comments on it?
Yes, yep. So Russ will go through those on Tuesday night, but they did have some comments on different sections.
Anything big, like, oh my God, how could you guys do this?
I have to be honest with you, not that I remember in particular. There was further language cleanup and just thinking about different things, but no, nothing big.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think is a real advantage is that like Russell, that's what he does, and he does it throughout the state. And looking at our regional agreement, he thought ours was one of the better ones that he's seen. And what I really liked was it seems like there's a focus now on 3, maybe 4 key components that may need to be adjusted, but it's not going to be a tear it down, build it back together kind of approach.
One thing he did mention, sorry, it took me a minute to change my brain, which is really, we should have thought of it, but there's a chart in there about, it has the census data from 2000, maybe 2002. And he said, we need to update that to like 2020, just so that it was more reflective of the times.
So way back when we did it, so we had that discussion, remember, because the towns do their own census, but then we pick the numbers from the national census, you know, the 2010 and the 2020. So my recollection was that because the discussion was which census did we go with
I remember.
on 2020? I don't remember.
Federal.
The language is in there because we actually talked about that.
The federal
federal.
census, and then in
Yeah, that's-
October, we go with the town.
With the towns, okay.
Cheryl?
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember from the conversation, Chris Lynch said, we have language in the contract that says we can increase the size of the committee or decrease the size of the committee based on the census. She said, you can't do that. So the language we read the language in the current contract that says, if the numbers show that we should raise the committee number, which made the seat number 15.
Right.
It doesn't require an amendment to this regional agreement. She said, you can't do that. I'm like, you approved it the last time. I had to go to the commission to get
Right.
approved in the beginning.
Right.
So we've done that. And she said, you can't do that. So I think Russell's gonna be talking about
Yes.
that in the next meeting.
We did do that.
Yeah, we did do that, but the language in the contract said we could. Chris Lynch, who's the DESE rep looking at it, said, you can't do that, but she's the one that okayed the last
Right.
revision,
got it, right.
2014. So it doesn't make any sense.
But we are club, that's why.
That's right. We are Quabbin.
Good, okay, thank you. Public comment? Anyone in?
Public.
We've lost our fans over
Lost,
time.
okay. School committee concerns? Seeing and hearing none. New business, request for approval for MSBA statement of interest for Hardwick Elementary School project.
So there's an actual motion that needs to be read?
It wasn't on the consent.
Counselor? Would that be Walter?
No.
Walter?
Holy moly.
And this is the truth. And I have to do a roll call.
Pete's here.
Here's the motion. Having
convened an open meeting on March 13th,
Allow me.
2025, prior to the SOI submission closing date, Auburn Regional School District School Committee, in accordance with the charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendents to submit the Mass School Building Authority statement of interest dated March 14th, 2025, for the Hardwick Elementary School located at 76 Schoolhouse Drive, Gilbertville, Mass. 01031, which describes and explains the following deficiencies in the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future, specifically a new roof checked off on the statement of interest. Checked off on the statement of interest formed in a brief description of the deficiency described herein for each priority. The shingled roof warranties at the Hardwick Elementary School have expired. Plywood is buckling in a few areas, raising the shingles. Shingles are starting to crack. Ridge vents have to be replaced continually as they are coming off, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Mass School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance of the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the Quabbin Regional School District to filing an application for funding with the Mass School Building Authority. That is no motion.
What'd you say?
No, just kidding.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Second, okay. Any further discussion?
Good job.
Roll call.
Dr. Allen?
Yeah.
Mr. Marsh?
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps?
Yes.
Mr. Willannon?
I think yes.
Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Garvey?
Yes.
Ms. Cartier?
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes.
Ms. Mock?
Yes.
Mr. Wiggler?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Okay.
There was this item that we just got informed, so we're able to do this as a new business, but approval for the DECA
So moved.
to attend the international conference in Orlando, Florida, April 26th to April 30th, 2025.
Second.
Moved and
You
seconded.
want to put the number of students in there?
2 students.
One chaperone.
Chaperone. 2 students, 1 chaperone. Friendly amendment on that to clarify. And then the date 26th to the 30th. DECA International Conference, Orlando, Florida.
Good luck.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none?
Dr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Marsh?
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps?
Yes.
Mr. Willannon?
Yes.
Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Garvey?
Yeah.
Ms. Cartier?
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes.
Ms. Mock?
Yes.
Mr. Wiggler?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yeah.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. There's no request for executive session. Motion to adjourn
Move we adjourn.
and second and adjourn.